pivotal. It explains the financial policy here at Smithtown Gospel Tabernacle. So, if you send out a letter, you will list the letter, put the church in there. You don't have them make the check out to you. You make it out to Smithtown Gospel Tabernacle. Now, the greatest invention I think God gave in this last days was those little stick-ons, you know? All right? Put that, have them put a stick-on with your name on their check so when they get in, they'll know where to credit it to. Okay. Now, the other thing real quick with the application is that we've said this before. Here's the thing. There are many, many people out here in our church that won't be able to go on a trip. But they have a burden for the country you're going to, or they have a burden for that missionary that you're going to help, or they just really want to get behind the project that you're doing. They can't go, but they'd like to help maybe financially. They'd like to help prayerfully, you know, that kind of thing. You want to get these folks on board. Okay, the way it's set up is that once we get this application finished today, and it doesn't have to be as perfect, and get there, Anna will take this in, enter it into the system, into the online giving system, okay? And what happens is when you pull up that trip, your name will be on there, but your name won't be there unless there's an application that's been completed, okay? Once it's in there, then people who see online or get to know you, it's like finding somebody on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, they'll see your name and they'll say, I want to give an X amount on it, and then the accounting department will direct that to there. So here's the thing. The longer you delay, the less opportunities you have for others because they may just take it and give it to someone else or to other areas. So that's basically why we're trying to get this done. But I want to go into the spiritual aspect of finances, and there's three. I've never been one for 7 points or 10 points or 3 P's or 3 A's, whatever, but it just worked out that way, the 3 P's, okay? The thing is, the first thing, and you're going to hear more about this, by the way, there's no class next week. The next class is going to be right after Easter, will be April 8th, and that's going to be on prayer and fasting. So we're going to have a lot of time in prayer. But the first thing that really comes to heart when you're dealing with finances is you're getting a heart for something, is what I love is Matthew 6:33. And I know you know all this verse. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and these things will be added unto you. Okay. The thing is, just the fact that you're here in this classroom is you've been seeking the Lord to be part of a trip. So you're getting that part down pat, okay? And the thing is, all these things will be added unto you, okay? And that includes finances. You know, as you're putting up, God's going to start speaking to people to do that. But you don't want to take it to the point where you just say, okay, I'm here, well, I guess the money's just going to roll in. It doesn't really usually work that way. This is where the next one comes in, is where you start to plan. And this is the part that I love from Luke 14:28 says, and he's talking about the builder. And he says, but when a builder begins to build, he goes and counts the costs. Now, if you look at one of these things, we've already figured that out. The short-term team, the vision board has figured out, if you look at your trip, they figured out your costs. So those are the costs, okay? Now, some of you may be independent contractors, you know, you may have the cost of the trip, but because you're taking time for work, you don't have vacation time because you work for yourself. So you're also going to figure in those costs as well for yourself, trying to figure those things on that. But the next thing the person does is they start to plan what the costs are going to be and that kind of thing. So you've got that pretty much from this description. And there again, you can put this in your letter. Okay. The third part is what I call the prepare part. And this is where, you know, God really works in the Midwest. It comes from Proverbs 6, verse 8. And it's about, says, take a lesson from the ants. You know, they're very hard workers. They don't have any government. They go ahead. And of course, it's the same one. Use lazy bones, use sluggard, whatever. But in other words, you've gotten the purpose already from Matthew 6:33 of seek ye first the kingdom. You're here. Okay? You're starting to count the costs, which we've done here. Okay? That kind of thing. Now it's the planning. So you seek out opportunities. One of the things that I always appreciate about God is that if you ever look at anything that ever got done in the kingdom, it's because they were workers. They got things done and that kind of thing. They found creative ways. And here's the interesting thing. People love to get involved with people who are industrious, who are doing things and that type of thing, and getting things done. When you get out there and share your vision through your letter, or through talking to people that you work with, that kind of thing, people sometimes they see what your involvement is, you know, that you're not expecting anything. They want to get involved. So keep those things in mind, because these are really points that I think will help you focus that. You know, just say, God, open the doors for me. Like for me, I don't usually send letters out, and I think it's great that you do, you know, that kind of thing. I just pray, I say, Lord, I pray for overtime, I pray for extra hours. Sometimes my boss calls me and says, hey, I need you to work on this project, I want to bring you in for a couple extra days. I say, oh Lord, I can put that up. Sometimes I make tips, I put that aside. That's one way, that's just something I like to do. Others send letters. Now, some of you can pay your own costs, and that's fine. But one of our great team leaders is Jason, who always says, even if you have your own money, still send a letter out, because it's money that you can use for the team for other projects that the team may need down the road. So that, I don't want to take anything away from Justin, but Justin's going to come up and share about the faith aspect of all this.
Thank you. So, if Pastor Rich was here and he's not, he would say too, this is week 3, to get those applications in, and also to have that $100 deposit down, which is what we're going to be working on later. But like John said, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the faith component of this, of mission trips, because it really involves a step out of our comfort zone. And I really want to leave a lot of time for the leaders to get their interviews done so you guys can finish your applications. So could I need a volunteer, somebody could read Hebrews 11:1 for me? One of my favorite verses. Let's see. Anybody who's got it?
What, in NIV or I have it.
I'll get it. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen.
I really like that verse because that really encapsulates what faith is all about, because you're believing or hoping for something, but you have no concrete, no tangible evidence that it's actually going to happen for you. And that's what our mission trips are about. We have about 7 trips going out. They all cost a lot of money, and for right now, I know for me, I don't have the money to go on the trip, but I'm believing God that He's going to provide the finances for it. One of the examples, I was working on my notes last night, and I came up with 3 examples of faith in the Bible that relate to missions. And one of the first ones that I came up with was Joseph on his journey. And Joseph is often described as an example of waiting on God, given a promise, and waiting on God to fulfill that promise. Joseph had a dream, and he wasn't able to see the fruits of that dream until years later. But if you look closely at the story of Joseph, it's really a missionary journey. So we all know the story, how he had a dream, he was in his homeland, his brother sold him into slavery, went to Egypt. So I'm just going to throw it out there because I like to get everybody involved. In what way was Joseph's story similar to a missionary trip? Anybody?
You're just thrown out.
Okay, so Lori said you're just thrown out there. Anybody else?
Went to a foreign land.
Exactly, you went into a foreign land. Now with that, there's a bunch of different categories to go with that. So Joseph was in Israel, sold into slavery, go into a foreign land. He had to make the best out of a situation. He didn't speak the language. He had to get a job, work in Potiphar's house, didn't speak the language, whole different education system, different food, different laws, different customs, which is very similar to what we're all going to be experiencing when we go on our missionary trips. For example, in England, you're going to the UK, similar language. Same word might have a different meaning. We're going to Nepal. Totally different language. I don't think they're going to be speaking English. We're not going to be speaking Nepalese. Mexico, Guyana, Tanzania. They're all going to different places where you are the foreigner. We're going there to help people where it's their homeland. Another example of faith that I came up with was Sarah. And we often will credit Abraham for being the father of a nation, but Sarah doesn't often get enough credit for being the mother of a nation. Abraham, Sarah doesn't get a lot of credit in the Bible. She's mentioned, to being the wife of Abraham and everything, and we see the journey that Abraham had of how he had to leave his father's land, how the angel came and told him, "You're going to be the father of many nations. We're going to give you a son." He took things into his own hands. But Sarah had to take a step of faith too, because she was well past childbearing years, and at the same time, it said, "You're going to have a son." So for her, she had to step beyond her comfort zone and believe that what God said was going to happen was going to happen. We'll go back to the verse. It's the substance of things hoped for. She was hoping for a child, but she couldn't see it yet. So that's a very definition of faith. Another one I came up with was Noah. So we all know the story of Noah and how God told him to build the ark. And it was those were bad times back then, but Noah was called to do something, to build a boat to protect his family from rain. No one knew what rain was back then. It never rained up until that time. The only way they got water from the dew from God, and Noah was called to believe in something even though he hadn't seen it. In that same chapter in Hebrews 11, there is a condition. Faith is conditional. So in Hebrews 11:6 it says, "But without faith it is impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him." So without taking that step forward, it's impossible to please God, like it said. And when you break down that verse, it requires us to take a step toward him, to step out of our comfort zone. When you take that step, it says, "You're a rewarder of them that diligently seek him." How exactly do you seek God? Anybody? I know how I see it. Yeah, how do you seek? How do you seek God? Yeah. Reading the Bible. Anybody else? Prayer. Quiet time. The closet. Your prayer closet. And that's a very, I know for me, I've been on several trips. Getting into your prayer closet in the weeks and months leading up to your trip is going to have a very powerful impact on the nature of your trip and the impact that you're going to make with the people that you're working with. So I have a couple points, and so one thing that faith requires is it requires a relationship. It's not just you operating by yourself, and it's not just Jesus operating by himself, but it's a relationship the two of you together are making. It's as if you're walking hand in hand down a path. Now, some might disagree with me and say, "Yeah, but God doesn't need me. He can just, snap his fingers and take care of it." But in actual fact, we're called to be the hands and feet of God on this earth, and he wants us to take those steps. It's by using us to do his work that he's going to show his power evident to those people that we're working with. And I know for me, a lot of people look at me, and I'm a physical therapist, and they say, "Oh, well, look at you, you're so big and strong, and you can do anything. You can lift up anybody, you can do this, you can do that." And I take it as a compliment, but in myself, I know that I can't do anything without God. It's strange to me how people on this earth live without God. I look at him as my anchor, and without him, it's who am I? Who am I? Just one person in this world trying to survive and make it, when I could try it, and people do, but your life is so much harder without him. I look to him, and why wouldn't you cling on to the maker of the universe, who has all might, all power, and can guide you on this journey? So faith requires a relationship, and by our own strength we can't do it, but with God's strength you can do it. Second thing about faith is that it's going to push us beyond our comfort zone. Anybody, I'm going to pick a table. In which way, in one way, give me a way, Nepal table, Will a mission trip stretch you beyond your comfort zone?
Lack of sleep.
Lack of sleep. England team.
Well, the first time I went to Africa and we made a rest stop, there was no toilet. There was a hole in the roof.
Amen. That's right. When we went to Nigeria last year, toilet seats were optional. Totally optional. Mexico team. Anybody? In what way will a mission trip stretch you beyond your comfort zone?
I think it's interacting with each other in such a close order.
Yes, exactly. A lot of what Pastor Z says, he's got that 19-inch barrier. And when you're going to these foreign lands, it's not, hey Jay, it's, hey Jay, how are you? And yes, definitely, you're outside of your comfort zone. Your interaction with your teammates. Oftentimes, when a trip starts, you may not know everybody. By the end of the trip, they're going to be your best friends. What table do we have? Is Guyana? Food. Yes. When we went to Nigeria last year, we had 3 squares of rice every single day. Every single day. What table do we have over here? Liberia and Tanzania, kind of? Okay, so one of you guys, give me an example of which way a mission trip will stretch you out of your comfort zone.
About public speaking or evangelizing.
Oh yeah, public speaking. So I got my public speaking bug scared out of me in Nigeria last year because there was 3 of us, myself, Ed, and Artie here, and we were the Americans. So they said, Americans are here. They took us, we were all over the country. They took us to the churches to the south, north, east, west. Many people had not even seen a white person. And who do you think was the center of attention? The American team. Going up there, guys, share something. You got an hour. What? What? And Artie can testify by the end of that trip, it was not who wants the mic. It was, give me that mic, I got this. And yes, definitely, public speaking will definitely push you beyond your comfort zone. Abraham, who's credited with being the father of faith, before he was called Abraham, he was called Abram. And Abram was really pushed out of his comfort zone. For some of us here, we're going to be leaving our mother and father for a significant amount of time. For some of which might be the first time. If you ever left mom and dad. Abram, before he was called Abraham, was called to go to a new land. He was called to leave his father for a purpose, go into a new land, settle it, with no idea of how he was going to do it. But God said go, he said yes, I'm going, and the rest is history. Along the way, he had a couple of struggles, you know, some of the situations that Abraham was in, going to a new land, he met a king. The king wanted to marry his wife. And he said, no, don't tell them you're my wife, because if they know you're my wife, they might kill me. So say you're my sister. And Abraham stumbled sometimes, but he also was a good example of faith, because he was able to go to a new land without the evidence of what was before him. And, you know, he was able to settle a new land, fulfill the promise that God gave to him, and make a lasting legacy. And I think sometimes with mission trips, you know, we look at it from our perspective as a short-term trip, and sometimes we'll lose focus of the sight of the missionaries that we're going to serve there. And that requires a lot of faith too, because the missionaries that we're going to serve there, they might have been there for 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, 15 years, and they have put in the work before us. They have really softened the soil so that when we get there, we can be an aid to them. And that's a really big part of every short-term mission trip. It's not about us or about what makes us comfortable. It's about going to our missionaries and giving them a hand, a break, to just kind of give them a boost, to give them the strength that they need. For some of them, they might be looking forward to this trip for years. For some of them, they might have been really bruised or damaged by a short-term trip in the past and are kind of wary of what you're going to bring to the table. So, for me, I'm on the short-term mission committee, and John kind of pulled me in years ago. I forget how many years it's been now, and if you speak to me for any amount of time, you're going to know that I have a passion for mission trips. I love it. God had to call in my life for me to go to the nations, I know that. But before I caught the bug, I was always the person in the back of the room who said, when the pastor said, "Who wants to sign up for a mission trip?" I was, "Nope, not me." And I caught the bug in 2005 when the tsunami hit in Indonesia. And I was part of a church, and the pastor said, "We're sending a team to Indonesia to help out, to help the people there. We need a team to go." And as soon as he said that, I said, "I gotta go." I had no idea what I was getting into, but I said, I have to go. I have to go. And for that trip, it was to Indonesia. It was around $2,000, and I paid for it out of pocket. At that church, they didn't believe in sending out letters or fundraising, so I just paid for it out of pocket. The next 2 trips I went on, I also paid for it out of pocket. It wasn't until I came to this church in 2007 that I actually learned about support letters. I said, "Yeah, I paid for it before, I'll just pay for it again." And one of my first trip with this church in 2008, I think I sent out a support letter, and I think I got half of the money. I went to Nigeria in 2008, and I think I got about half of the cost of the trip. And I said, "Oh, I like that." And a lot of people were very willing to give. So I've been 2008, 2011 was my second trip with this church. It was to Nigeria again, about another $2,000. I think I paid nothing. Nothing. Not a dime did I pay. So a lot of the teams, I was looking at the cost, $2,000, $3,000, $1,500, $1,000, $1,500. It's a lot of money, And I always go back to the Hebrews 11:1. It's a substance of things hoped for. We're hoping for money, but we don't have it yet. But that's where the faith part comes in. When I went to Indonesia again back in 2007, I can tell you story after story of people who wanted to go on a trip and they didn't have the income. They just simply didn't. I remember for my second time to Indonesia, it was 4 of us going, and week after week, I would speak to this girl, Julia, and I'd say, "Hey, did you get the money in?" "No." "Did you send your letters out?" "Oh yeah, I sent out hundreds of them." Week after week, "Get your money in?" "No." "Get your money in?" "No." "Well, we're getting pretty close. We're leaving in about a month. Did you have any money in?" "No." "Okay, well, you have money for a visa?" "Yeah, I'll give you that, but I really don't have the income." The day before the deadline, it was a $3,000 trip. Our last meeting before the trip left, "You have your money in?" "Yep, all came in." 3,000 came in, like that. It's not impossible. There's a verse that I wanted to share with you, but I'm not going to go into it. It's Isaiah 55, 8-13. You can feel free to read that on your own. But just to piggyback on what John said, we really encourage you to send us support letters. For me, I recently changed jobs. I'm doing home care therapy now. At my last job, I worked at a facility, and people will often be intimidated by sending a support letter that is very personal, will detail their faith and their relationship with God, and give it to their coworkers or their boss or distant cousins, family. And I would really encourage you to give those letters to everyone, because you never know who is going to support you. When I was at my last job, they all knew that I did mission trips. 2 years ago, I went to Tanzania. We did a bake sale, and we went out to Pathmark in Center Reach, and we were trying to sell cookies and cupcakes and everything. And we were there for about 8 hours. And we sold probably half of what we were going to sell. And we're like, I don't know what's gonna happen. One of my teammates was like, well, maybe we can go to the school and just walk around. Kids like sweets. So no, we'll just give it a little bit. So around 3 o'clock, I'm looking at everything on the table, and I say, you know what? I'm just gonna send out a text to all my coworkers. I sent out a text to about 20 people. Phone would not stop buzzing. Give me 10 of these. Give me 15 of those. I want 24 cupcakes. I want 10 pretzels. I want this. I want that. I want this. I want that. And people, once they read your letter, people want to give to a good cause. And you are all doing a good cause right now. So please don't be intimidated by sending out your letters. I'd actually encourage you to pray over your letters before you send them. And God will put them in the hands of the people that you're supposed to give them to. And just one more point before we break into the groups and the interviews and everything else is in regards to faith, we have to remember who God is. For me, I have a strong faith in God. I know that regardless of where I'm supposed to go, whether it be to serve the lion tribe of Africa and go work with lions, or whether it be to go to minister to the gorillas of Colombia. It doesn't matter, I'm going. If God says to me, I'm calling you to go to this trip, I'm going, because I know that He will not let harm come to me. If I'm on His trip for His purpose, I know no harm will come to me. So in regard to that, there's a couple of examples of who God is. In Philippians 4:19, it said that He's my provider. In Psalm 18:2 and Psalm 84:11, He's our protector. He's our shield and our defense. In 1 John 2:27, He's our instructor. And in Matthew 7:9 through 11, He's a good Father. You know, Jesus in that scripture is saying, you know, which of you, if your son asks for an egg, is going to give him a snake? If he asks for bread, is he going to give him a rock? You know, if you're meant to go on this trip, He's going to take care of you. And that's a big step of your faith, because you don't know that right now. You're all going to a foreign country where the details of your trip may not even be known. But you put your trust in Him, knowing that He's a good Father, He's going to take care of you. And He's Jehovah Jireh, He's our provider. The first mention of Jehovah Jireh is in Genesis 22, where Abraham, who was the father of our faith, was asked to sacrifice his son. And Abraham did it on blind faith. He did it not knowing that God was going to stay His hand and provide a sacrifice. But after that instance where, you know, the angel came down and stopped him and provided the ram for the sacrifice, Abraham called that place Jireh, my provider. So God will provide for you. So that's all I really want to share with you guys. As John said, all of you should have a short-term trip application. Like he said, there is an essay back there. There's 3 parts to that essay. We're not looking for a novel. Please just be honest. Be honest and transparent. We're going to hand out paper for you guys to finish that essay, and I believe that the team leaders are going to be doing their interviews and everything. So I think some of them will be going next door. Some of you guys may be doing it here, but that's all I really have to share. So give you guys plenty of time to finish your applications, get your deposits in, and write those essays. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you.